Hello and welcome to Eye on China. I'm Liam O'Neill. If you've seen our show before, you're up to date on China's economy-crippling zero-COVID policies. Last week, we showed you why China continues with them. Party infighting helps explain Xi Jinping's obsession with the policies. Today, we'll look a little deeper at this obsession from a historical perspective. But let's first start with analyzing Communist Party theatrics. Last week, Xi Jinping went to Hong Kong to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Hong Kong handover from Britain to China, but Mr. Xi was hardly in a celebratory mood. He wore a mask constantly, didn't shake any hands, made a speech to only 4 officials at one point who stood 30 feet away, and he skipped altogether the flag-raising ceremony for no apparent reason. This was in great contrast to his visit to Wuhan City just the day before. There, he mingled in close proximity with the locals, he shook hands, all this without a mask. Why the contrast? Well, Wuhan, of course, is ground zero for COVID-19 pandemic, and it's also ground zero for Mr. Xi's extreme lockdowns. The Wuhan people were the first subjects for the total lockdown experiments, and today they continue with mandatory testing, quarantines, and enduring quietly the economic impacts. Not so in Hong Kong. One of the richest cities in China, similar to Shanghai, it had much more to lose than Wuhan from these lockdowns, and lost it has. Since the February lockdowns started, flights to and from Hong Kong are down 90%. People and investments are leaving to the extent that even former Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam admitted in June that workers and businesses are flooding out of Hong Kong due to lockdown measures. The people of Hong Kong are tired of the flagging economy and its food shortages. In January of this year, 65% of Hong Kongers thought similarly to the rest of the world, we need to move on from the lockdowns and live with COVID. 6 months later, that figure is certainly higher. And this is the point of Xi Jinping's theatrics. He cannot stand that people are defying his zero COVID policy. His extreme behavior in Hong Kong, despite only 5 COVID comorbidities in July, that's for a city of 8 million, amounts to a cold shoulder being shown to the people there, versus a very, very warm embrace to the people of Wuhan. Let's look at the historical and cultural perspective of these theatrics to shed some light on them. There's a word in Chinese, zhengji, and it doesn't really translate well into English. Literally, zhengji means political achievements, but it carries a lot more weight in modern China. A political achievement in the United States, for example, it might mean low unemployment, affordable gas. These are impressive. But political achievements for Communist Party chairmen over the last 70 years are much more tectonic in their scale. Here are some examples. Start with Mao Zedong. He, of course, had the Great Leap Forward in the 1950s. Well, this was tectonic. It led to tens of millions of people starving to death. He also had the Cultural Revolution, which in about a decade virtually eradicated traditional Chinese culture. His successor, Deng Xiaoping, had perhaps 3 zhengjis: the one-child policy, hundreds of millions of abortions, imminent population collapse. That resulted from the one-child policy. He also had economic opening up in 1978. This perhaps made China the world's factory. And he had the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, which has kept political reform from happening in China all the way up until today. Jiang Zemin, he claims the Three Gorges Dam and the genocide of Falun Gong. And both of these zhengjis required massive redistributions of Chinese GDP, and in the case of the latter, brought the phrase organ harvesting into the human lexicon. So zhengjis, political achievements, at the position of party chairman in China, these are not just feathers in one's cap. They amount to economic overhauls and demographic shifts that are so large that they have the potential to alter the course of human history, not just China. They're not always tragic, like most of the examples I just gave. Because they necessarily involve political flattery, they can actually be amusing. Here's an example. Around 2013, Xi Jinping started urging the country to launch a toilet revolution. Initially, this was about updating the dirty, hole-in-the-ground type of toilets commonly used in rural areas. But a wave of luxurious public restrooms construction followed because the lower-level officials wanted to fulfill Xi Jinping's toilet revolution ambitions. This restroom in Xinjiang, that's where the Uyghurs are persecuted, cost over 2 million yuan, and that's according to Xinhua News. This one in Wuhan City shows stall availability on a screen outside of the restrooms, and also it comes with facial recognition toilet paper dispensers. Like most Zhengji projects, the restroom revolution involved mobilization of many sectors and spending of great amounts of money for political fanfare. But some of the toilets never even opened, like this one in Hebei. The toilet revolution was a small Zhengji, and it didn't go that well for Mr. Xi, but neither have some of his bigger ones. His Belt and Road Initiative is failing in almost every country, causing a series of problems like energy shortages and debt crises. Most recently, it played a role in the bankruptcy of Sri Lanka. Diplomacy under Xi Jinping also has not gone well. Pushing hard for his China dream, an answer to the American dream, Xi urges his statesmen to present a tough face to the West. This is known as wolf diplomacy. But Chinese ambassadors' hostile and rude rhetoric has hurt China's reputation. China's international reputation has further taken a hit because of leaked documents proving that the genocide of the Uyghurs in northwest China is true. The West has also rallied against China because of its backing of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. All of this and the 2022 Olympics didn't seem to help China's image either. Given all of the failures above, Xi Jinping is putting his hopes for a historical Zhengji in zero COVID. The country's leadership is somewhat divided over the policy. Some in the highest levels of the CCP, that's referring to the Standing Politburo, have essentially voiced opposition to zero COVID. Namely, Mr. Li Keqiang has spoken about the dire state of the economy as a result of the policies. Hong Kongers are certainly against the policy, as are residents of Shanghai, but less well-known protests around the country probably mean that the vast majority of people are against them as well. But as the Chinese saying goes, it's difficult to dismount from a tiger. Once you take a ride, you better keep going, because as soon as you dismount, it will devour you. Expect zero COVID to continue, at least until the 20th Party Congress in November. Should Xi Jinping hold on to power at that point, his Zhengji will continue. Should he lose it and a new chairman is appointed, look for zero COVID to end almost overnight. Ending zero COVID may be the new chairman's first major political achievement. Thanks for watching Eye on China. Please leave us comments to let us know what you think, and we'll see you next time.